9:32, I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Moved by Greg, seconded by Stuart, that the agenda be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with the agenda? I'm just going to take, for anybody watching the video, I'm just going to take a little bit longer on all these because I'm watching to see Councillor Mitchell, who's participating virtually. Got to make sure that I see him in the little tiny corner on my screen as opposed to his normal chair. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. And are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes, moved by Finch, seconded by Gregg, that the minutes from the January 17, 2024 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with those minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So, nobody submitted for public comment period? Thank you. And we have two timed items then, a 9:35 zone change application and 10 o'clock delegation. We could hum and haw for a minute or two, or we could do the fire report. So I think we'll jump down and just do the fire, if everybody's good with that. 8 report 2024-17 from the fire chief regarding monthly fire report for January 2024. Are there any, obviously we don't have a fire chief right now. We are between fire chiefs. Does council have any questions for staff before I do the motion? Councillor Mitchell.
As you just mentioned, we are between fire chiefs for about 3 weeks. I just wondered, who is the acting chief for these 3 weeks?
Don?
So the duties are split between the 3 district chiefs depending on the area of the concern. Administrative staff in the office will be taking care of any of those types of issues, but where it's on the boots or on the ground, then it'll be Mark Woods in Thamesford as the deputy district chief, Matt Cockle and Scott Matheson. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure that clarify what was going on there, because I know under the provincial legislation we do have to have an acting chief for these 3 weeks.
Yeah. Under our establishing and regulating bylaw, they are all appointed as chiefs.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we're at 9:35 now, so moved by Stuart, seconded by Greg, that the council meeting be adjourned at 9:35 a.m. for the purposes of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Spencer, I will turn it over to you for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report for zone change before council this morning, ZN 52314, affects property municipally known as 163 Brock Street, and council will be familiar with this property and the particular area being rezoned today as the site of the new municipal office and the child care center. The report seeks to rezone the lands from an industrial zone and place them into the central commercial zone. As outlined in the report, there are actually no special provisions being requested as part of this. Oftentimes we will see deficiencies on frontage or depth or area or one other provision. However, in this case, all the provisions are met and both of the uses are identified as permitted uses within the central commercial zone. As a result of circulation, there were no comments received from any neighboring residents or otherwise. Staff are recommending the application be approved today, and just I would further note for council that there are a number of applications we are awaiting on for this property as a whole, so I do anticipate we'll see some of those start to come through in the coming months. So the property overall will be changing dramatically over the course of the year, certainly. This is just the first report which seeks to identify one property which is essentially ready to go as far as the overall redevelopment of the Maple Leaf site. Happy to answer any questions council might have.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell, then Deputy Mayor Greg.
Two questions, Spencer, as regarding the timing of this application. Why wasn't this application made before construction began on the ZMC?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Mitchell's question, the structure which is being constructed right now is identified as a public use. Both the daycare and the municipal office are identified as public uses and as such are permitted in almost all of the zones within our township zoning bylaw, including the industrial zone. So there was no real urgency in rezoning the property at that time. And further, we were anticipating that we might be seeing several zone change applications come forward all at once to rezone a number of parcels within the Kingwood site. That was not the case, so this is a case where we are seeking the rezoning of the one site, which is, as you know, under construction.
Don?
One other aspect of that is the Ministry of Education does require the site to be properly zoned. I had discussions with ministry staff about this issue. I outlined to them that our zoning bylaw did permit it regardless of the zoning, and they still weren't satisfied. So that's one of the other reasons that we moved this forward.
And just to clarify, that's Ministry of Education in this context responsible for child care. Yeah. Councillor Mitchell?
And my follow-up to that is, would a private individual or developer have been granted a building permit for a similar project before the zoning change was approved?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, provided the developer was proposing a permitted use per the zoning bylaw and meeting all of the provisions, yes, a permit would have been issued to them as well.
Thanks for clarifying that, Spencer, because the reason I asked the questions was when I first looked at that, it appeared to me that we had kind of put the cart before the horse in going ahead with construction. And then the perception could have been that because we're the township and this is our project, that we knew we were going to approve it anyway. So I just wanted to make it clarified that we followed all the steps that anybody else would have to follow, and got our T's crossed and our I's dotted to make this process the same as anybody else would have to go through.
Any other questions on the report? Deputy Mayor Greg?
I'm not sure if this question is for Spencer or possibly for Mike. The comments from Oxford County Public Works Department is that backflow prevention measures are required for buildings at this location. Are you able to confirm if that is something that is in place for the structures that that are already under construction, or is this something that is yet to be put in place?
It will be in place before we move into the building, whether it's now or in the, we'll have to see if it's in the scope of it. It should be, yes.
Okay, so there's no further action that needs to be taken at this point, or, okay.
Any other questions on the report? It's the applicant here, and do they wish to speak to their application? No. Are there any members of the public either here in person or virtually that wish to speak to the application? Not seeing any, then moved by Grigg, seconded by Finch, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approves zone change application file number ZN5-23-14 submitted by the Corporation of the Township of Zorra for lands described as Part 1, Reference Plan 41R 10471 and municipally known as 163 Brock Street, Thamesford, to rezone the subject lands from General Industrial Zone MG to Central Commercial Zone CC to recognize the nature of the public uses currently being established on the subject lands. Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that? Councillor Finch? Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that pursuant to the Planning Act, public meeting adjourned at 9:41 a.m. and the regular meeting of council be called back to order. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So next timed item is at 10 o'clock, so until then, if you're all good, I will jump down to reports from staff. And the next one up is 8.2 Recreation Department, Report 2024-019 from the Recreation Programs and Services Coordinator regarding Recreation Monthly Report for January. And while this report was written by Ali, it is going to be presented by Sophia, which I think everybody on council has met before, I think. No? This is Sophia. I will turn it over to you to highlight whatever you want in the report, and then I'll ask council for questions.
The only thing I'll highlight at this point is we are actively recruiting for summer camp, and we're really trying to push registrations for our upcoming March break camp.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Yes, welcome to Zorra Township. Welcome to your first council meeting. My question is on the large hall in Embro. From 23 to 24, it's seen a significant increase to usage program unpaid. I just wondered, does that increase have an impact on the availability of that hall for rentals?
Yes, so just to provide context to that large increase, pickleball wasn't introduced to the schedule until fall of last year. So that's why there is such a large increase to unpaid programming. So it does limit our ability to accept rentals on Monday, Wednesday mornings, and Thursday evenings. But it is a highly popular program and does seem to be serving a community interest right now.
And thanks for clarifying that. I'm always glad to see more usage. I'm even more glad when it's rentals that's making up that usage. But I think those hours that you mentioned are probably not in high demand for rentals. So it's better to have the benefit of the program of pickleball than a potential of 1 or 2 rentals a month. So.
Any other questions on the report? I just a comment then from me on I really like the section on the programming attendance in there, and I really look forward to seeing that as we go forward, like informing more of the, like as Councillor Mitchell said, there's the issue of rental halls, and then there's also the issue of bodies showing up, residents showing up and actually using the facility. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see us get educated by that as we go forward. Anyone else? Moved by Stuart, seconded by Greg, that report 2024-019 from the Recreation Programs and Services Coordinator be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Building and Drainage report 2024-015 from the Building Services Coordinator on Cloudpermit survey results. Nicole, is there anything you want to highlight in that for council? Can I get you to move up to him? Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure everybody can hear you.
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to say that we are happy with the results, with over 50% of people having a 4-star, 5-star user experience. I wasn't really sure what to expect because most of our interactions when it comes to Cloudpermit are with people who haven't necessarily had the greatest experience. They're calling in because they're stuck along the way, or they can't upload an attachment, or they're maybe just not as technology savvy, which is okay. And we've taken that and used it as a teaching moment, or help them through the process. So hopefully next time they'll have an easier time submitting their application. And I think it's great to hear some of the feedback from the builders. It's clear that a lot of different municipalities are using Cloudpermit. So builders that are in London, that are also building in Thames, they can see all of their applications in one spot, which seems to be a hit and easier for them. So I think overall we're really happy with the results, and we've taken the feedback. There's things that we can action. This will be shared with Cloudpermit, so there's certain things that they can action from their standpoint. And yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes in 2024.
Thank you. Questions from council on the report? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think it's great that we have this more efficient process for all the high volume builders out there, but we'll continue to offer the service for anybody who feels, not as tech savvy to come into the office and sort of work through the Cloudpermit process with staff, right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, I would say weekly, yeah, I'm on the phone, or people are more than welcome to come into the office, and it's easy for me to be able to see their application in a draft mode, so I can help walk them through the process and get it submitted.
Yes, thank you for the report. There's lots of good information in there. I like reports with charts. I like reports with comments, and this one has some of both. So, any comments from you about the amount of staff time difference between that's required to process an application through Cloudpermit as versus to the old paper system?
Yeah, from a review and processing of an application, it doesn't save a whole lot of time. Where we see the time saving is from other administration duties related to permitting. So a lot of what's changed is a lot of the process is now put on the applicant as opposed to staff. So the user now has to upload their attachments and their drawings as opposed to us spending the time and scanning them and filing them. And it saves us in other areas where we're going and we're looking for drawings prior to going out to an inspection, or we're looking to provide the drawings to MPAC. We can now do a quick search in Cloudpermit and pull it up electronically as opposed to going to the basement and searching for the paper copy of the drawing. That's just to highlight a few things, but really administratively, from my role, it saves a lot of time and keeps us organized.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? Moved by Greg, seconded by Finch, that report 2024-015 from the Building Services Coordinator be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Deputy Mayor Greg.
Just a quick comment. I agree with Councillor Mitchell. It's great to see charts and also the kind of feedback in the comments in the report. It was really interesting to see how many commented that they weren't tech savvy and weren't able to navigate smoothly on their own. And then great to see those comments in the next section turn around to, but we had the adequate human staff support that was able to make the process ultimately positive. So I think the value of providing that staff support for those who are not frequently using the program is valuable, but I also just wanted to comment that that is a testament to the level of customer service that our staff are providing. That we have someone there to answer questions is great, but that those that are interacting with the process feel that not only are they getting the answers they need, but they're getting the support that they can still have a positive experience, as what we're seeing captured in this survey is incredible. So I just wanted to thank staff for their excellent customer service.
Anyone else? I think anytime we make a change in service that gets an average of 4.07 stars, so that's like honor roll or dean's list territory, right? And I think, you know, most municipalities and any service that we offer, like, I'd be surprised if we got that rating on just about anything we do. I'm not saying I would agree with that, but I think that measurement is impressive. And I think also this is a great example of we made a change and we reported back on the outcome of that change to residents, how we did it. And I think whenever, you know, we pass a budget and people get their property tax bill, one of the things I hear from residents is about where are the efficiencies in government? Where are you finding ways to do things better? And while this one isn't one that's going to directly reduce somebody's property tax bill, it is a way of spending their property tax bill to deliver a better service to them. And they've told us themselves that it's a better service because 4.07 stars out of 5 is pretty amazing. So very happy with the change, but more happy with this report telling us about the impact of change and what our residents think about that impact. So excellent report. Very happy to have this. Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And building and drainage again, report 2024-014 from the chief building official drainage superintendent regarding monthly departmental activities and year-end summary. Mike, is there anything you want to highlight in that report?
Nothing right now.
Questions from council? Councilor Mitchell.
Mike, on the chart that gives the totals for 2023, there was 2 permits voided. Under what circumstances would a permit be voided?
So either they've decided not to go ahead with the project, which we will void the permit, or it could be if we issued a permit in air, which we didn't, then we could void that permit as well.
Thanks, Mike.
Anyone else? Moved by Greg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2024-014 from the Chief Building Official Drainage Superintendent be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, the chart that we get every month that shows the various permits have been issued and value and whatnot. The number that's jumped out at me, and one that I've been following throughout the last year, was that in 2021 we issued permits for 101 new houses, 2022 109 new houses, and last year only 31 new houses. And so a significant drop in new house permits of 72% as opposed to overall drop of 32%. And I think that's certainly, with all the pressure to build new housing, is an interesting number to look at. And there's a lot of factors way beyond our control that are contributing to that. I think probably at top of the list would be the higher interest rates that both potential buyers and builders are looking at. I think there's also the uncertain economy, with people unsure whether we are going into a recession and they're going to be losing their jobs or having reduced income. And I think also higher taxes at all levels are impacting on whether people are taking the jump into it. So although some of the blame is placed on municipalities that we don't do our share to get new housing built, I think Zorra has done everything we can, and we still see a significant drop in new housing starts last year.
Anyone else? Moved by Greg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2024-014 from the Chief Building Official Drainage Superintendent be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 8.4, Public Works Department, report 2024-016 from the Director of Public Works regarding a recommendation to add an informal spring sidewalk inspection. Steve, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
No, nothing to highlight.
Thank you. Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Steve, what exactly is a sidewalk section? How big is that?
The section is the full width of the sidewalk, which is 1.5 meters, and the area between each expansion joint, which is also 1.5 meters.
Okay. And my second question, of the number of sidewalk sections identified in the spring 2023 inspection as needing repair for safety or replacement, how many were repaired or replaced before the fall inspection took place?
The number of sidewalks identified needing replacement when the spring inspection was 10, and all 10 were replaced before fall inspection of the same year.
Okay, so there wasn't any duplication on that ones left over from the spring that would show up on the fall inspection?
No, not this year. We've had issues in previous years with contractors getting work done on time and leaving it too late in the fall and then not even being able to do it. We've switched up contractors and did some more work in-house ourselves on those type of projects, and we're able to get them fixed up before fall this year.
And I apologize, I didn't ask this one before. How much of this sidewalk work is in-house as opposed to contracting out?
Right now, I'd say about 30%. We're looking to increase that to maybe a full 100% in the future. We've got a few staff members that are actually have side jobs of doing that kind of work, so it kind of is an advantage to use in our for this type of work. So it's just more or less sourcing the proper forms and the form stakes to have in stock to be able to do these types of jobs.
Pouring sidewalks, like a lot of jobs, it's more complicated than it looks.
Yeah,
thanks for the answer, Steve.
100%. Yep, and playing with the weather and pedestrian protection is always something that's an equation with sidewalk work.
Any other questions on the report? Deputy Mayor Greg.
Well, we can't know for sure the nature of exactly what causes all of the damage to the sidewalks, separate from the heaving from the thaw coming out of the ground. Does staff have any indication about what is causing some of the cracked and damaged sidewalks throughout the summer months?
Yeah, it's quite often it's construction jobs going on in private property and yards and stuff. It could be in building fences or putting new driveways in, pools and things like that. So it's something we have to stay diligent on, and usually the permitting process will capture this. It's the work that's being done without permits that we have to keep an eye on, that we have to recognize during our patrols, so we can, approach these people if there's damage done. So, but that I would say is the majority of the damage to the sidewalks is from those type of works.
Anyone else? Questions on the report? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Finch, that report 2024-016 from the Director of Public Works be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
I think staff and council know I get pretty fired up about sidewalks, and if there's one area of a sidewalk that's causing a problem for pedestrians to be able to use, I think that is absolutely a concern. We have the sidewalks as a significant investment for us to be able to have safe, active transportation throughout our village, which we're always looking to entice our residents to use more. I was anticipating by the time this report came forward that I would be advocating for a change in the system of how we do things. But what I'm seeing here is staff have provided not only the right measurements for us to actually look at the data so that we have a deeper understanding of what the actual situation is, but between our Public Works Director and our Chief Administrative Officer providing their lens, able to see what is the best method forward. So I'm satisfied to receive and file this report and to not make any changes to how we are inspecting our sidewalks, and I'm confident that with the program we have, we are able to continue to prioritize the use of the sidewalks and the safety of all of our residents. So thank you so much for this.
Any other discussion? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Finch, that report 2024-016 from the Director of Public Works be received and filed for information purposes only. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And one more minute. Report 2024-018 from the Director of Public Works regarding a recommendation to purchase a zero-turn riding mower. Steve, is there anything you want to highlight for council in that?
No, nothing to highlight. Thank you.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Just a compliment to staff that they continued to do some more research into this and found out before they went through with the purchase of the original plan that it didn't work as well as hoped at other municipalities, and that they come back with this alternate plan to as outlined in the report. So I just want to say thanks for doing that extra bit of work and talking to their compatriots and finding out what would work best.
Anyone else? Moved by Grigg, moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that council directs staff to purchase one new John Deere Z994 diesel commercial Z-Track mower from Premier Equipment for the cost of $22,171.03. Is there any discussion? Yeah, I guess my first reaction when I saw this report was I thought, does council even need to see this? Staff are buying equipment they need that's approved in the budget. It fits within budget. Why do you need to look at it? I think people convinced me that I was wrong on that, and the more I think about it, the more wrong I think I was, because I think this is another example of where staff have worked within budget and they're going to deliver for, I think, $1,400-ish less than what was budgeted, a better solution. So again, in the context of those questions from residents, where's the efficiencies in government? It's right here. Like, for less than what was budgeted, we're going to get better equipment and deliver a better service for residents. So, yeah, added to the list of times I was wrong, and thanks to staff for, as Paul said, for continuing to do the work and find a better way to do it. So, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And now we are at 10 o'clock, so we will switch over to the delegation from Upper Thames River Conservation Authority and Tracy Ant. Executive Director, to present, and I think Chair Petrie is here as well, but I believe not speaking, but I'm sure willing to take a question if asked one. And of course, we all know that Councillor Mitchell is Zorra's / Oxford's representative for Zorra on the board of Upper Thames. And as I say to everybody, so first of all, welcome. Good to see you, long time. But also, as I remind all delegations, assume that this council's done their homework, read the presentation, hit the highlights for us, and they will have questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us here today. So with that in mind, I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview. I recognize you've just been working away at your strategic plan and wanted to highlight some of the areas where the Upper Thames Conservation Authority align with your own strategic objectives, specifically in the area of fiscal sustainability. We're going through our budget process right now, so I'll highlight a few points on our budget. The sustainable community goals and objectives, your livable, healthy communities, and your governance and corporate excellence. Again, we have those same connections. Next slide, please. For fiscal sustainability, as a watershed, you'll see our entire watershed area. Zorra Township is a large part of our watershed, right in the middle there. But in all of our municipalities, we really truly try to leverage those municipal investments to deliver programs and services on a watershed basis. We have mandatory programs and services that the province requires us to undertake, and with that, we ask our municipalities for 60% of that funding opportunity, and then we leverage those dollars through other grant programs and applications and our own self-generated revenues. We have non-mandatory programs and services as well. Again, we're asking for 13% of those investments. So when you look at the slide there with the pie charts, those pies are proportional and outline what the mandatory programs or Category 1 programs are versus Category 2, which are entirely self-funded through contracts. Category 3 programs, again, still a significant amount. I think there's about $4.5 million of programming there. But again, a huge portion of that comes from those other sources of revenue other than asking for municipal levies. So. And then we have other Category 3 programs which are specific to our campground operations, and they too are entirely self-sustaining with their own funding sources. Certainly, we've had a number of budget impacts this year for 2024, primarily legislative changes. I think just in the previous slide that you've seen, reorganizing our programs and services into 3 different categories with funding restrictions in those 3 different categories. We've had new mandatory deliverables that are all required by the end of 2024. Another slide later on that touches on the specifics of that. New service delivery standards. Certainly, we've been working towards that through our Section 28 permitting responsibilities, but also through the changes made through Bill 23 and the Planning Act, wanting to make sure we're meeting those timelines so that refunds are not required through applications. And then, of course, we haven't had any additional provincial funding to undertake this additional work and responsibilities. Rather, instead, when it comes to collecting fees that we would typically through our planning processes or through our Section 28 permits, those fees have been frozen. We received a minister's direction in 2023 that they would be frozen, and then again, that's been extended throughout 2024. So it really makes some of those challenging situations a little bit harder. Historically, the province reduced funding in the mid-90s through our provincial transfer payment. We've had additional cuts in 2019 to that provincial transfer payment. It was reduced by half. So really that's limited our ability to have a reserve set aside for specific project areas. And of course, through the pandemic, we've all had different challenges, but with the conservation authorities, we were unable to receive that COVID benefits. And of course, with municipalities, I think we're all operating in a different environment right now, making sure that we can have qualified staff and retention, lots of retirements as well going on in our office, updating our compensation and review. We have aging infrastructure, increased capital costs associated with that infrastructure, and of course, growth and development pressures as well. And not just within a growing area, but we're finding with growth and development happening around our properties, that additional need to enforce encroachment activities, dealing with encampments in our urban centers. These are all additional stresses that we haven't had in the past. And certainly, as I mentioned, those development review fees were frozen, and reduce access to provincial grant programs in some cases. And of course, inflation, inflation, inflation. I think we've all heard that. But we still do have our own goals to be fiscally sustainable as well. We do invest in our infrastructure. That infrastructure, like Wildwood Dam, for example, but we also have Fanshawe and Pedak. They're there to protect people and property for current and future generations. We want to make sure that we're keeping that in a state of good repair so that we don't have major capital investments required at a later date. With sustainable community theme, we certainly try to mitigate the impacts of a changing climate by enhancing and protecting our natural environment. And with our goals and objectives, it's particularly surrounding those surrounding watercourses, valleys, and wetlands, and any opportunities that we can have to increase wetland areas, increase natural cover, and allow for more sustainable and resilient communities moving forward. As well, we do this through stewardship and restoration services. We provide forestry services, not only to increase forest areas, but also to improve the health of our forests. We also provide agricultural stewardship services by looking at new ways to have cover crops, improve windbreaks, and again, making sure that those ag lands are protected as well. And on the theme of landowner and stewardship and restoration, we are hosting a landowner workshop. That information will be coming out shortly if it hasn't been already. Our member representing you, Paul, will be providing the welcoming remarks. So again, that'll be at the Embro Community Center on March 21st at 7 p.m. So certainly opportunities to, again, not only our work, but making sure that the community members and landowners within your municipality are also engaged in sustainable communities as well. Through our own work, we restore sites on both our lands and other public lands. We do this as well where we can partner in other public lands and private land ownerships. But the example here on the slide is at Wildwood. Again, looking at ways to naturalize former aggregate areas back into sustainable areas and building natural environment connections. We do this through the Clean Water Program as well, providing technical expertise and incentives through grant programs to support that on-the-ground implementation of those best management practices. And through and understanding our sustainable communities, it's that monitoring piece. I've heard it this morning a number of times, looking at, well, what data supports the decisions we're making, but having that collection of data on the ground to understand what the local subwatershed health is, looking at trends, and then setting priorities. And not only just for ourselves and reporting back on that, but that inspires that local environmental action. And we do that primarily through our report cards. We look at those every 5 years, report back on what the state of each subwatershed is within the Thames River system, and again, look at opportunities for how we can engage others into improving their local environment. On the theme of livable, healthy communities, we provide those natural spaces. I mentioned Wildwood already, but again, expanding on those to allow for inclusive and accessible recreational activities for residents to maintain active lifestyles. We do this. We have areas like our boat launches, again, that are accessible for all, and making sure that not only do we have lands like Wildwood that are more active, but then those other smaller CA areas like Embro and Harrington for passive recreational activities without limitations. We do a lot through our community partnerships and education programs to empower both communities and youth. Again, creating value for a healthy environment through opportunities to experience and learn about conservation and our messages through hands-on activities. We host water festivals, engage in natural connections events, and making sure that the public or even school programs get out to learn more. And through the next slide, we do this as well through our partnership activities, through partnering with the Lions Park in Thamesford, looking at clean water projects, again, allowing for more healthy and livable communities in the municipality. And again, I say our work complements the strategic goals by implementing land use policies to protect people and property from natural hazards. Again, natural hazards are an impact, and we want to make sure that we're keeping development away from those areas and making sure that that is sustainable in the future. And as I mentioned previously, our governance and corporate excellence, we've streamlined our service delivery, having standards for our Conservation Authorities Act permits. We've been about 90% or above. We're just working on the data for last year, but for the last couple of years, we do a reporting back on how well we're doing at meeting those timelines. But we do require additional staffing to expedite and comment on Planning Act applications. The picture here is at Piddock, lots of growth in that area. And again, to inform that decision making, having up-to-date hazard mapping, having that up-to-date information, you understand where those hazards and risks are, and then again, keep people and property safe, as mentioned in the previous slide. And it meets our regulatory needs. We have a number of legislative changes that are required to be undertaken. We have to have our asset management plans for water and erosion control structures in place, ice management plans, land management plans that include public consultation, our comprehensive land inventory, lands acquisition and disposition policies, and our watershed-based resource management strategy. Again, that involves consultation. I think, yeah, there's lots of things that we are required to do through legislation. I think in the end, it'll all provide greater transparency and accountability in our day-to-day operations. So just lots of work to do this year. So with that, myself and Brian are here to answer questions, and I'm sure Paul will be able to answer questions virtually.
Thank you. I love that you finished with the picture of the baby turtle slide. Good, strong finish. Questions from council for the delegation. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, Tracy, I'm wondering if you could speak to, like, a lot of this, the services you're providing. I see a bit of an undertone in the report about, you know, challenges from a lack of funding or the province not funding. So whether it's through increased revenue, I'm not sure through your own operations or through the municipal levies that you gain, like what's the plan to sort of tackle that problem? Seems to be an ongoing problem. So what's the theory in terms of trying to solve that?
Yes, thank you for the question. Through the mayor, we certainly do have some challenges because in some areas we are restricted on how we can improve that. We're hoping for some engagement with the province to have them lift the direction to allow us to increase revenues through fees. But also, I think it's that understanding from our municipalities that, yes, the province has made these changes since a long time, and it's just makes it pushing those costs onto the lower levels again. And I think we've seen that a lot through a lot of different areas. So having that municipal understanding, councils within there can be that engagement with the province is one avenue. Certainly Brian's been keen to work with us on that. You know, as we finish these land management strategies and such, one of the areas is through our land management activities. Through having the inventories complete, identify, are there any properties that may not meet our strategic objectives? Are these areas that maybe we should be looking at selling those lands? Again, having some investment in areas of reserves in areas where when we do want to make improvements to properties that they can be funded that way. So those are a few of the areas that we're looking at, but I'm sure Mayor Petrie might have some other comments.
Not a follow-up, just a separate question, just to highlight the properties in Zorra that are controlled by the Upper Thames. I know we have Embro Dam, Harrington Dam, I think that is it, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, but also Wildwood, there's a huge part of Wildwood conservation area that is within ours. And then there are one small tract of land. I'm trying to remember what the name of that one is. The Cade.
Yeah, I always point out to people, while the municipal address of Wildwood is Perth South and the postal address is St. Mary's, the vast majority of the land is actually in Zorra Township in Oxford County. Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I just want to expand on a couple of things that Tracy talked about in her presentation, more from a board perspective. And the first was the extra $1.5 million increased in cost to meet the legislative deadlines that the province had put in. And both staff and the board recognized early in the process, in what was essentially 2 years of extra work to meet the deadlines, that unless Upper Thames staff were going to quit doing their regular work, it was impossible for them to meet these deadlines, which required that we hired 10 new full-time positions. And these positions, you just couldn't hire anybody off the street to do this work. That the education and hopefully the experience required warranted significant salaries for this people. So that's where much of the 1.5 million comes from. The board did express concern a few months ago about what would happen the necessity for those positions after the deadlines were met. And I think where we're standing right now, and we recognize that these new policies and new programs will require some implementation and maintenance beyond the end of this year, which will require at least some of those 10 people to continue in some way, but there also will be a look at if all of those 10 positions need to be continue to be filled, and the impact that will have on our operating budget. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, which was near the end of the presentation, was the impact of the asset management policies, the land inventory, land acquisition, and disposition strategies. And as Tracy mentioned, we do have significant land, and a lot of that land is located northwest of St. Mary's. It was acquired over the last 50 years for a flood control project that was officially deemed dead about 4 years ago. Since then, we've continued to rent that land out to area farmers. And once we have these strategies and policies in place, I think there's going to be a fairly healthy discussion of whether we should get rid of some of these properties or whether we should keep them. And if the decision is to sell, what is the best use of the proceeds, what we are allowed by the province to do with those proceeds going forward, and what impact that's going to have on not only the Upper Thames budgets, but municipal levies going over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So I just wanted to flesh out a little bit more from the things that I find very interesting sitting around the board table on topics that Tracy had mentioned in her presentation.
Anyone else? I find it very frustrating that the development review fees are frozen. And I know it always sounds good politically and tempting for any level of government to say, we're going to freeze fees. But it doesn't freeze costs, it just frees the fees. And this is a great example of how, so if you're a developer and you're going to Upper Thames, the fee that you pay is the same as it was 2 years ago. That doesn't change the cost. All it changes who pays that cost. And it's going to show up, I'm quite confident, in the levy from Upper Thames to, not paid by this council, but paid by residents of this municipality through the Oxford County tax levy. And I would really encourage your board to look to your municipal partners to have a joint conversation about, to Councillor Stewart's question, so what does that actually look like to people? This goes directly against the principle of growth paying for growth, which every politician in Ontario at every level says they embrace, yet here we are again with fees frozen and growth not paying for growth. I think there's a real opportunity for us to make that clear, that all we've done is shift the burden of paying the cost of that service onto other taxpayers who are, at best, indirectly going to benefit from it, when it should be the developer that is going to directly benefit from it, and the ultimate property owner is going to benefit. They should be paying that cost. I I know a couple of county councilors that would be interested in having that conversation and maybe some joint advocacy around what's really happening here when we freeze a fee and who's actually benefiting from it. Anyone else? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And on to 8.6, Corporate Services Department A, Report 2024-021 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding future development of 8 Commissioner Street. Dawn, is there anything you want to highlight for council in that report before I ask them for questions?
Just the only point to highlight is the good news that we did receive about the adjacent homeowner having the water well tested and not finding any salt or chloride contamination, so that allows the municipality to move ahead with potential development of our former public works site.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Finch.
Not so much, well, questions and comments. For me, when I'm looking at this report, I'm keeping in mind density, sprawl, and what variety of housing this community is in need of. And yes, we hope to get the best value for the property, value not meaning dollars, but also meaning the correct type of housing for this community. To have a well-rounded community, we need to offer all types of housing so we can keep all ages of residents in this community. Condo living can be for anyone, but let's keep an open mind and think for a minute. In the past, when parents come off the farm, they move into the village to a smaller home, less property maintenance for them, but they are still close enough to drive out and keep an eye on things. But then what happens when that house isn't fitting their needs anymore? Say they fall, they need a walker, a wheelchair, they move yet again. 9 times out of 10, they move out of the community. Since today we only offer Camberwell Court as a 1 level with an elevator, but try to get on that waiting list. It's a few-year wait. We do have an affordable and senior apartment building coming down the track, but wouldn't it be something if we had a condo 1 level, turnkey, no maintenance, and what if we could make them senior appropriate? So wider doors, no stairs. So when a walker or wheelchair is needed, it isn't another move. Then this option, again, isn't only for seniors. This is just where my mind goes from past experiences. Moving my grandma multiple times as she aged, wanting and needing different options. When I think back to growing up in this community, the village was mostly older residents, and they loved to volunteer and keep the community connected. In the last 15 years, we have seen a large shift in the age population over in Embro. The housing shifting as well, with new single-family dwellings up on Vinegar Hill. With seeing the village population younger, this means we all have aging parents, and when they are in the need to move to something smaller, whether it be off the farm or from town, just to keep close to family, wouldn't it be lovely to have a condo as an option? With my career in long-term care, I see firsthand people are wanting to stay at home in the communities as long as they can. So let's embrace that and help make this happen by putting up yet another new option that I believe will be good for the community. Keeping density and sprawl in mind, I think option 2 and 3 are out of the question, in my opinion. Option 1, I was sitting on the fence thinking about it, but yet again, I think, what is the community in need? It's a 1-level condo. This is the next missing piece for our community. I do realize I just made this sound like I am hoping for senior accessible condos, but they can be a variation of condos. With option 4, there's 3 set there, so we could go with anything. Dawn, I do have a question. Is there an option to back out of this if we don't get the price we want for this property?
Yes, so if council does decide to go ahead with an RFQ process, or RFP process, the municipality always has the option to not accept any of the bids submitted. So if it doesn't meet the financial wishes of the municipality or the design criteria, then it can be not accepted.
Not specific to any of the 4 options, but when we do RFP with one of these options as the criteria, Are there any mechanisms that we would have in terms of timeline for development to take place? Or would that ultimately still be at the discretion of the purchaser of the land and the developer?
I think given our past practice, we would look to utilize a lawyer that the county is using right now for the other Embro project, who's skilled in this type of land development and representing municipalities, to make sure that we have the proper safeguards in place that met council's wishes for timing of these projects.
Any other questions? Councillor Mitchell?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a fairly long list of comments. I don't know if you have a motion where it would be more appropriate to me to speak to it, or whether it would be okay to make those comments now to further the discussion.
I don't have the motion in front of me right now, but I believe there's one being worked on. And Councillor Stewart has a question. So if you're okay, then Paul, I'm going to wait until there's a motion, and thank you for acknowledging that, and then I'll have you speak to it once there's a motion on the floor, if you're good.
That's fine with me.
Thank you.
Whatever works best procedurally.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, Don, I just want to be clear, and maybe you can go into a little bit more detail on our control over this project, because I don't get that from reading the report, both your overview or from SPH. So when we say an RFP could be issued, we have control over how much of the details of a project, like right down to, and as Councillor Finch said, it'd be good to have, if it was a condo development, have the, wide enough hallways and accessibility standards that are slightly higher than, say, building code. All of those details could be put into an RFP, inclusive of timing as well, to Deputy Mayor Gregg's question, so that we are getting exactly what we want. And I guess with that, if we are that stringent, and that may be exactly what we need, what does that do in terms of competition, and how many less developers are going to be interested in delivering exactly what we're asking for, as opposed to giving some zoning guidelines and letting the developers, run their creativity from there? We still may get what we intend to get in terms of a type of development.
I can't say for certain if that's going to eliminate some. Depending on how stringent the municipality is with the requirements, it may lessen the value that is received, because if we're going above and beyond building code or causing the builders to have to put extra money into the project, so we probably wouldn't get the return that we were anticipating. Anecdotally, in talking with a couple of local developers, depending on how strict we are, it will impact value for sure. But the return on this project should still be quite good, considering there is no real cleanup required on site. What we are going to do with the existing structure is we're going to put it on gov deals and try and sell the building as is. The only money that we're going to have to spend would be some superficial cleanup, as well as removal of the existing salt dome. So it should be a fairly inexpensive project to get started, other than the engineering and architectural work that we would need.
And again, just coming back to the schedule question, so within the RFP, we have the availability, or the ability to dictate when we want this built by as well, to ensure that it actually does get built. One other question, I know you've looked into this, and we had this discussion as well earlier this week. Is there any potential other uses that the municipality has for this property that we should consider, at least before we move ahead? That's not spoken to in the SPH report, so I just wanted to rule that out. We can't buy it back once we sell it, so.
One of the items that has been discussed in the past is the potential relocation of Embro Fire Station. There was a preliminary review carried out by the past chief. It may be something that's worth another look at this once the new chief is in place, and also in discussions with the Embro Fire Station. Times change. I know when we looked at Thames Fire Station, the firefighters were not in favor of the present location. They liked a more central location. That was the sentiment from the Embro firefighters. That may change over time. So if option 4 is undertaken, there is a way that 2 chunks could be parceled off. leaving approximately an acre and a half for a potential fire station site. Or if it's not needed, it could be then parceled off to complement the other two buildings already built.
So that's another question I have is we're looking at this as one parcel right now. There is potential, and I don't know if that's something that council needs to direct staff to consider, but there's a potential to create the two parcels out of this and proceed with one half of the project or 2/3 of the project or whatever that may look like, rather than the entire 3-acre lot at once.
That's something we would have to look at when the project actually goes to market. If it's a 1 or 2-story building, that's a lot of units to bring into that small marketplace at any one time. So it may make sense to do one building at a time. We could certainly seek some guidance from the planning department on that, looking at past building stats to see if they can have any input on that, or speaking to local realtors to see what they would recommend as well.
Any other questions on the report? Follow-up question from me then, relating to Councillor Stewart's question. So if there's still potential consideration of relocation of the Embro Fire Hall to this property, is it not premature to consider, finalizing some options here and potentially going to the public for input on it if we decide we're going to move the fire hall, you might not get any of these options?
Looking at a potential footprint, it would be the westernmost building that would be displaced by a fire station.
If we were to go with that option?
If this was
Or
the
any option, it'd be the westernmost
Correct.
building?
That would be the location that I would recommend to council. That way you have access to the fire station from 2 roads. So you have the ability to have a pull-through rather than backing vehicles in that they do now.
Questions on the report? Councillor Stewart.
Only other question I had was revenue from the sale, and what the planned or potential best use for that revenue would be. Not asking for what the number's going to be, but what could it be used for?
So at the time this project was being considered, 2 of the options that were kept in the back of our heads would be the childcare component that we were looking at for Embro. If the affordable housing project does move ahead, that is something they are looking at for the ground floor. So that means the municipality wouldn't be spending that money on a childcare center. The second option was renovation of Embro Fire Station. So depending on what happens with that, if in the end we find that that is the preferred option, then we're looking at likely somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. New build would be likely north of $2 million, so we wouldn't be far off fully funding either project by proceeds of the sale.
Any other questions? I do have a motion then, moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that council approve in principle options 1, 4, and a modified version of option 4, removing the 2-story condos and replacing with 1-story condos in the report from SPH Engineering Incorporated dated September 8th, 2023, and that staff work on next steps as per the engineering report and provide a follow-up report to council, and that council direct staff to hold a public information session regarding the above noted options at a future date after a follow-up report is presented to council. Councillor Finch, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
So I chose the word support because I'd like to see these condos, but not exactly as they are. I'd like to see some options, 1 level, possibly 1 and 2 bedrooms, keeping an open mind of the possibilities. As I added in the information session, I want the community to remember not very long ago, the reaction some residents had with the land surplus, and with asking questions and taking time to sort out everything, we came to not surplusing the land and came up with a better option. I can only hope we can fill a room with positive people if we get to that point. I think getting more information from the engineer and next steps is also a good decision at this point.
Councilor Mitchell as the seconder. Do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I do, and I spent probably more time on this issue than the rest of the agenda combined because I think it's really important that we get this right. And what I looked at was, before looking at the options, was what 4 goals do I think we need to consider, and how we want to dispose of this property. And the first goal I identified is maximize the number of residential units on the property. And that follows along with our policies and our beliefs on infill, ARUs, and the preservation of farmland. The second goal is to promote the type of housing that is in the shortest supply in Zorra. And I believe that is rental. I don't remember us having a multi-unit rental property come before us that has actually moved to building stage. And I think we need to recognize that rental is for a growing and significant portion of the population. Rental is no longer a stepping stone to owning your own home. That now that the average price of a home is $700,000-800,000 in Zorra, that for many people, they are never practically going to own their own home. Much as that's a sad comment, but that is the reality. The third goal is that we provide housing that middle-income households can afford to pay for. And the numbers I looked to are come out of the report that Oxford County gave us almost a year ago on the other potential apartment building in Ambro. And their numbers for middle-income household was an annual household income of $66,500 to $96,600 a year. And their rationale is that household can afford a rental rate of $950 to $1,370 a month and a purchase price of $245,000 to $355,000 a building or unit. All those numbers are well below what the averages are for rental and for purchase. And the fourth goal identified is that we maximize the return on the sale of this property. This is the last significant asset that the Zorra has to sell. We've seen the value that we've got out of previous land sales and what we've been able to do with the profits from those land sales. If we had not made $3.1 million profit on Maple Leaf or somewhere in that neighborhood, there would not be a ZMC, Municipal Office and Daycare. So the proceeds from this sale need to go into our reserves so that we have the money to do future projects, whether that is maintenance or expansion or whatever us or a future council decides to do. Because if we don't have those reserves, we're hand-tied unless we have major tax increases. The money from this sale, I believe, would go into the facilities reserve. And in 2027, the projections are as of right now that reserve would have a deficit of $1.7 million without an injection of money from the Embro Public Works yard. The estimated value of this property has been put somewhere between $1.5 and $3 million. And it's important that we come closer to the $3 million than the 1.5 when we dispose of this property. So based on those 4 goals, I looked at the 4 options. Option number 1 being the 3 condo buildings, 44 units, 1,400 to 1,600 square feet with a value of $278,750,000. There again, I get all these numbers from that Oxford County report. To me, this does not meet goals number 1, 2, or 3. Options number 3, which is the 2 smaller townhouses and the 14 larger townhouses with 32 parking spots. They would rent for $2,200 to $2,700 and sell for $580,000 to $951,000. Both of those numbers are out of reach of middle-income households. Option number 2, building 10 houses with the possibility of 10 detached shops. Those houses at 2,863 square feet would have a value of $760,000 to $1.1 million. And if you add in the shops, I can see it quite possible that those properties would go from 1.3 to 1.5 million. Nowhere close to what a middle income household could afford. And option number 1, the 3-story apartment building, the 118 parking spots, 54 units of 1,076 square feet, which would rent from $1,400 to $1,800 a month, plus the 2 townhouses at 2,863 square feet, which would rent for $2,200 to $2,700 per month, or at the sale value of $580,000 to $951,000. Of the 4 options I've presented, that's the one I'm in favor of. But the one I'm even more in favor of is a variation of that, in that instead of being 3 stories, we go 6 stories with a possibility of 90 to 100 units, with a mixture of 1, 2, and 3, and possibly 3 bedrooms, renting in a range from $1,400 to $2,000 a month. And I think if we were to try to build a building of that size, it increases the chances of affordable apartments being included in there, which is 80% of the going rate, which would put those rents for those units, and I would expect, hopefully we could do 5 to 10 units in a 90 to 100 unit building of $1,100 to $1,600 a month for rental on them. I would take out the townhouses because the land is going to be needed for extra parking. We would need at least 200 parking spots. That's the one I'm really in favor of, and I would like us to explore, along with the option of just the 3-story apartment. And if that's not viable, then the townhouse apartment. The other 2 I have no interest in. The big unknown on all these ones is, or especially on the largest apartment building project, would be, does Embro have the sewage and water capacity to handle that size of a structure? I also think that the larger the building, the more appealing it would be to developers. The higher you go, the less per unit cost construction, I believe. And so that's my position. I'm going to support the motion that Crystal drafted, that we look forward. And the other thing is, what we've learned both from the ZMF and especially from the ZMC is that we don't want to limit our options too early in the process. And if we get more information on the 2 or 3 options that the motion speaks to, I think, as we learned with the ZMC, there could be more information that comes forward that changes what we want to do as we get into it. So, as I say, I'm in support of the motion. Of the options that presented, those are the ones I would like to explore.
Anyone else? Councillor Stewart?
Just want to clarify the motion. We're supporting in theory a couple of the options, which to me means that we're supporting a general direction of what we'd like to see, as opposed to other options that have been presented. But even in Paul's comments there, he mentions options of a higher building that I don't think were specifically outlined in Crystal's motion. So what I want to be clear on is that what we're supporting is a general direction of what type of housing we think makes sense. We had some back and forth about, possibly phasing the project, because if we put up at the end of the day, if we put up a 6-story apartment building, number one, is it going to get filled or is it going to sit half empty? If it's likely to sit half empty for a certain amount of time, does that mean no one's going to bid on this project? There's a lot of factors that I don't think have been outlined. There's still, even though we've kind of narrowed the scope of what type of project we'd like to see here, there's still a ton of specifics that need to come through the scope of the RFP project. And what I'm asking is for clarification. I'm in support of the general direction that we're headed with it, but is it so specific, the motion right now as written, that we can't deviate from options 1, 4, or 4.1, for example?
So I would so thank you for asking that question of clarification, because again, just a reminder to council and anybody else that council speaks through resolution and bylaw and not through what the 5 individuals of us might say or concerns we might express. And so what the resolution states is that council approve in principle options 1, 4, and a modified version of option 4, removing the 2-story condos and replacing with 1-story condos in the report from SPH Engineering Incorporated dated September 8th, 2023. So the motion is very specific, I think,
Yes,
which is, not out of order at all, whether, notwithstanding who does or doesn't agree with it. So that would mean specifically options 1, 4, and option 4, removing the 2-story condos and replacing 1-story condos as outlined in that report.
Yeah.
Is specifically what council would be saying, just for clarity.
Thank you. So I wouldn't support being that specific at this stage, and only because I think there are viable options that we want to leave open. Even somewhere between 4 and 4.1, if we're going to call it 4.1, where we can still have 2-story condos. We make the bottom floor accessible and we make the top floor less accessible, whatever that looks like. But there are too many options out there to be so specific, I think, with the information we've been given. So I just probably like to put up an amendment just to make sure that it's clear that we're headed in a general direction as to the type of housing we think we need for the community, but I don't think we want to be so specific at this point.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Gregg.
Can you read the remaining part of the motion? Okay.
Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that council approve in principle options 1, 4, and a modified version of option 4, removing the 2-story condos and replacing with 1-story condos in the report from SPH Engineering Incorporated dated September 8th, 2023. And that staff work on next steps as per the engineering report and provide a follow-up report to council, and that council direct staff to hold a public information session regarding the above noted options at a future date after a follow-up report is presented to council.
Okay. A lot of notes, and I'm going to try to organize these comments in the way that you can follow. So there's a lot of pieces that Councillor Finch highlighted both before the motion was read and her speaking to it after that I completely agree with, and I think we are collectively interested in heading in the same direction. I'm sensing some consensus there. The priority for me, which I believe aligns with Councillor Finch as well, is that we are able to tackle the gap in the variety of housing in the community. We know a healthy community requires a range of housing, services, amenities, etc. We know very well that we lose our seniors in our rural communities, and that having adequate space for our seniors to be able to stay in the community where, as you said, they're volunteering and they definitely bring a sense of community. We all benefit from that, and because of the affordability crisis and access to services, we lose our seniors. Embro has recently seen the new business with the pharmacy, which, while it's not healthcare, they are now able to do some minimal prescribing, and that is bringing a level of service to Embro, and so anything that we can do to help support that. I'm always hesitant because we have undertaken some projects in the past that have resulted in some positive things in Zorra, but we have sold lands, and where they end up isn't quite exactly what we had hoped for. So, I'm mindful of making decisions, anticipating a specific outcome with the criteria that we would like, knowing the reality of development is something different. We know this across the province, where we're trying to meet housing targets and municipalities are tasked with doing that, and ultimately we can approve all of the development and then it sits until the developer wants to push the button. So we had some discussion around what mechanisms we could use to push the timeline. We know through our building reports that we're not building right now for good reason. It's expensive. So, we can push this forward now and decrease, what is maybe higher on Councillor Mitchell's priorities and lower on mine, but still a priority, is the revenue generated off of the sale of this by pushing it forward. The urgency of this project is the next big priority for me because I'm feeling the weight of the housing crisis. But I am concerned that too many controls on how we push the timeline will reduce the value of the land and the scope of developers that will undertake it. So that's a piece that I'm struggling with. Hold on, let me make a note before I forget a little side quest I want to go on. We've mentioned that this property was assessed for whether or not it would be useful for fire department. And CAO provided comments on, through that assessment it was determined no, but things do change. And I do think that, out of respect for the new leadership within the department, that I would like the opportunity for our new incoming fire chief to be able to have a look at this once oriented to Zorra, in consultation with the Embro Fire Department, to ensure that I would like to just review this one more time before we put that to bed. We explored it because we knew there was good potential for it. I would just like to go through that exercise one more time before we proceed. Going to the public is important. Councillor Finch spoke to that. When we're ready with options that we know to be good for the community, that we're ready to throw our weight behind, we want to bring that variety of options forward to the public. What I don't want to do is bring options forward to the public that we're not ready to move forward with, that we're not confident are going to be good for the community. The resolution doesn't speak to public consultation now, but after that subsequent report. So I'm comfortable enough with leaving that piece in, but I would say that I think there is still significant work between now and that public consultation. And the other thing which goes back to my first priority of addressing the gap in the variety of housing. All of this conversation started in tandem with the conversation around the potential for an affordable house build in Zorra. And Embro had some lands identified at the recreation center, and we went through that process of, will that be the best spot? Some public feedback that was pretty harsh, and some further investigation that turned up a really great option that we're all very excited about. That project is still being, the specifics of it are still to be determined. We all have our dreams of what that will do to support the overall health of the community of Embro. But we don't know exactly how many residential units that will provide. We don't have a guarantee if that will include daycare. So because we rarely have the opportunity to help guide some of the development through the holding of lands that we then get to sell and choose a developer for, I'm also a little uncomfortable moving forward with filling a gap on this project and endorsing what that gap is until we know exactly what gap we're filling with the affordable build. So we're talking a lot about seniors and affordable housing. Until that building goes up, I'd really like to see what that is and how that addresses some of the gap in our housing crisis. And if we're able to then confirm on this project and move forward with it, that it might then better support filling the remaining gap. If our seniors become adequately housed within the affordable apartment building, that's a great fit, then maybe this is a great spot for low-cost entry-level housing through the two-story condo units. So I am hesitant to move forward with approving in principle the options 1, 4, and 4.1. I would be comfortable endorsing for further exploration 1, 4, and 4.1, and I think that would allow for us to capture some of what Councillor Mitchell had indicated, some variations on Plan 1, and it also allows for us to go to our new fire chief and allow for some further exploration there if council concurs. So I realize that was a lot of speaking and a lot of different pieces, but I think there's a great motion on the floor, and I think that there may be some space for an amendment that I would be willing to support, but as it stands, I will not support this motion.
Anyone else? I'm going to digress a little bit here. I think Zorra residents are absolutely spoiled by the four of you, and maybe they don't know it. I think Councillor Finch offered like great direction to council to say we should go in this direction. I think, and maybe somebody should write this down because I agreed with every single word that Councillor Mitchell said in his comments on the report, and then I agreed with everything that Councillor Stewart said and everything that Deputy Mayor Grigg said. So I have little to say in addition to any of that. Completely agree with Deputy Mayor Grigg's conclusion that directionally this is the way to go, but I'd be very reluctant to move towards finalizing something as detailed as Councillor Stewart said without knowing. I don't think we need to wait until the affordable housing project is built, but I think we need to know what an approved drawing looks like or what we're going to get, and also the information around the fire hall. I still have my doubts as to whether this is the right location, but I mean, we have subject matter experts to advise us on that, and I think if that's an option that's back on the table, I wouldn't want to take it off the table if it could end up being a good location. If there's millions of dollars difference between renovation or new, I think we need to know before we take an option off the table. Even if the new hall is more money in the long run, if it delivers better service and there's value in that for residents, I'd be hesitant to take it off the table at this stage. But so I'd be willing to, and as much as this report, this motion would get us back a follow-up report from staff before we go to the public, I don't think I could support, I will not support this unless there's some kind of consideration or evaluation of the fire hall there as well. Because I'm just not willing to go ahead with a public meeting to say to people, this is what you could get, except we might change our mind and put a fire hall on part of it. I think that would be too much, I think, for us to put in front of residents to say, it might be sort of like this, but it might not sort of be like that. We don't really know what it might be. I don't think I'm comfortable with doing that. So, yeah. So I guess a question I would have for staff on this would be, if this resolution, if this motion is passed, and the wording here is, hold a public information session regarding the above noted options at a future date after a follow-up report is presented to council. I guess my question is based on the discussion, the questions, and the debate that's happened today. Does staff have enough information from council to bring us back a follow-up report that would be, obviously in staff's opinion, informative to council moving ahead to the next step in the decision-making process?
Yes. So my review of this, along with SPH and other senior staff, we would look at all these options. So even though I might go against a resolution where it speaks specifically not to look at two-story, I think we would throw an option in there too. I think it gives council options to consider, even if it's a step down, that the easternmost units would be single-story, and then the central units could be two-story, so there is that break. We would also evaluate a site for a potential fire station. So I think there's enough latitude in the resolution that's before council that staff could move ahead with that.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
Can we pause for a second? Like, I'm just drafting a couple
Yep.
amendments because
Yep.
I think we've got a great motion on the floor, and I think I've got a couple of separate amendments that I'd like to propose, but I just need a minute. That's tons, thank you.
Okay, we'll adjourn for 10 minutes. That means we'll come back at 11:10. Lisa, can you hand us an order off? you. 11:13, and I'll call the meeting back to order. We were paused during consideration of Report 2024-022 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding Zorra Municipal Center project, and we're going to pick up again. If there are no other questions, I have an amendment that two members of council worked up while we were gone. I'm not seeing any other questions. So the amendment that I have is moved by Greg and seconded by Stewart, that the wording, quote, approve in principle, end quote, be changed to, quote, endorse for further exploration, end quote, and that, quote, and that the property continues to be considered in conjunction of the above options for other municipal uses, end quote, be added to the bottom of the motion. Deputy Mayor Greg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
I think the amendment put forward is just to sort of capture some of the discussion we had around this. I think the small tweak in the language at the front end of the motion helps sort of capture that we're all moving in the same direction with this. We've got some consensus around that. We just don't want to commit to anything specific in the report at this time. And then the second piece where we're adding keeping consideration of these lands in conjunction with those other options for alternate municipal uses would allow for staff to keep working, in consultation with new fire chief if there's some different perspectives about the potential use, but also as we watch the affordable housing project solidify what that build will include or not include. If the child care component is not able to be captured in that project, then we could still consider it in conjunction with this project. So that direction basically is for staff to keep all of that on the radar as we move forward with this. And then the remainder of it would still be, I'll leave it there because it's just an amendment.
Councillor Stewart is the seconder. Do you wish to speak to it? Anyone else on the amendment? Councillor Mitchell.
I'm going to support the amendment. I think the key thing is that we move forward. The two driving issues is that there is a need for housing, and if this council really is concerned about getting housing built, we can't afford to receive and file. We need to do something that moves the project forward. The other driving force is we need to understand what the revenues are going to be from the sale of this project so that we can put them into future budgeting with some confidence. What I heard from the discussion earlier was that we all want to see something to happen. We want to make sure that we leave as many options open. And as I said earlier, if we learned anything from the ZMC discussions, that went in 180 and 90-degree directions multiple times as to what we were going to include in that project, what we were going to take out of that project. And it eventually turned out to be the best possible solution. And I think this amendment to the original motion allows us to move forward with leaving as many options open, and it's the best first step on what to do with this.
Anyone else? Councillor Finch.
I agree with both Councillor Gregg and Councillor Mitchell's comments, and I am happy to approve this.
Yeah, I will be voting in support of the amendment as well. I'm going to read the amendment again, the amendment, and call the question on the amendment. Moved by Greg, seconded by Stewart, that the wording, quote, approve in principle, end quote, be changed to, quote, endorse for further exploration, end quote, and that, quote, and that the property continues to be considered in conjunction of the above options for other municipal uses, end quote, be added to the bottom of the motion. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So then the now amended motion, is moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that council endorse for further exploration options 1, 4, and a modified version of option 4, removing the 2-story condos and replacing with 1-story condos in the report from SPH Engineering Incorporated dated September 8th, 2023, and that staff work on next steps as per the engineering report and provide a follow-up report to council, and that council direct staff to hold a public information session regarding the above noted options at a future date after a follow-up report is presented to council, and that the property continues continues to be considered in conjunction of the above options for other municipal uses. Councillor Finch, as the mover of the now amended motion, do you wish to speak to that?
Again, I think working all together around this table, we've come to a great motion moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell, as the seconder of the amended motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, my previous comments covered this as well.
Anyone else? So I'll just say then that, my job of offering leadership to council has been quite appropriately and effectively co-opted by everybody else on council, and happy to have it done. I will be voting in support of this. I'm not going to read it again because it's long and wordy, and I think we've all covered the ground. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And report 8.6B. Report 2024-022 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding Zorra Municipal Center project. Don, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
There's one correction that did not get made. It was on page 2. The correct total is 308,475, but there should have been AV equipment in there for, I think, 79,400. Oh, it is in there now. Sorry, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we're good then. It was uploaded.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Don, page 1, listing of the change orders. Winter heat, is that the heat that was used during the construction over the last few months?
That's correct.
And my other question is, under funding, I didn't see any green funding. Is there potential that there are green funding grants? I know we're looking at green funding grants for potential EV charging, but any green funding grants for the building itself?
For the building itself, no, at this point. Where we hopefully will get some funding is on the solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be an add-on to the building. The provincial and federal budgets will hopefully be out within the next 2 months, and we'll just wait and see if there's any funding announcements for that.
Okay, thanks, Don.
Any other questions on the report? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Finch, that report 2024-022 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding Zorra Municipal Center project be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
Just some comments, and the good news out of this report is the $500,000 from Oxford County. That certainly helps with deferring our costs. And there's significant increase in cost due to the change orders, but I think that's an impact that we decided to go with design and build on this project as opposed to the architect and design mode, which we used on the ZMF. And I think going design and build, we have a much closer relationship with the builder, and that's given us a chance to add and change features to improve the operations and the functions of that building going forward. The impact is that in short term you have higher construction costs, but in long term it makes a lot more sense to do that than knowing that you should have changed something and then having to retrofit it a few years down the line. The change, the limit, I guess, and hopefully there aren't many future changes since this building is getting close to conclusion, but we are having to do some internal boring, which is a bit disappointing, but at least we won't be incurring financing charges at the higher interest rates doing that. But it does reduce the funds available in some of the reserve, whatever reserve we're pulling that from, that could have been used for something else. So I think if there are future significant changes, then we have to look at whether we go forward with them or what impact that will have on those reserves and whether depleting them further will have a detrimental impact on our ability to do other things or to keep taxes not at a low rate, but at an acceptable rate.
So there was an allowance in the report noting $110,000 for anticipated change orders. We think that that should cover the remainder of any change orders that are required for the project.
Any other questions from council? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Finch, that report 2024-022 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding Zorra Municipal Center project be received and filed for information purposes only. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And correspondence requiring direction 9A, correspondence from TAPMO Chair regarding request for financial support for TAPMO Executive Director position. I do have a motion here. Are there any questions for staff on this before I read the motion? There can be questions after I read it too, but just in case. Councillor Mitchell.
I guess a question to you, Marcus, as a member of TAPMO. How was the $25,000 municipal contribution determined?
So the discussion at the TAPMO board or executive was around the general need for such a position, because it's been identified, as this council well knows, that a lot of the lobbying advocacy work that TAPMO has done has taken like sort of 10 years to come to fruition, and there's been, you know, two chairs until last term of council. There was no executive or structure to TAPMO at all. And the worry there was that there's still advocacy to be done, but that with municipal elections happening, that would there really be the needed continuity at TAPMO in order to make that advocacy effective? In other words, if essentially all the work is being done by elected municipal officials who are then elected to the TAPMO executive, is there just so much disruption through that all the time that there's no continuity and therefore ineffective advocacy? So the concern was, let's create the position. Then the concern was that there has historically, with TAPMO and with other groups like that, been a reluctance from some municipalities to pay the fees required to get the work done, frankly, until the work is done, and then and all the municipalities say, well, that was actually worth it. Now I'll fund it. So what was put forward here by James Seeley, Puslinch Mayor and TAPMO Chair, was that if a few of the municipalities that are members of TAPMO in good standing and saw the benefit of the advocacy work that TAPMO does, were willing to fund the position in the short term to get it off the ground, that then the idea would be for TAPMO, as this council knows again, has recently implemented a fee structure, that ultimately that fee structure would be looked at, and that all municipalities that are members of TAPMO would be then contributing. So it's sort of an incremental approach to trying to get there. At the TAPMO executive, I voted in favor of it. As a member of this council, I do support the request, but I'm not in love with the idea that some municipalities are going to disproportionately carry the burden out of the gate. But I do think that it's sort of a practical reality of the politics of it, that some municipalities aren't going to see the benefit of this until they actually have the paycheck in their bank account for the increased assessment. So yeah, that's how it came about.
So it's essentially a one-time, let's get it started contribution. And then once, if this goes through and we have that position filled, it won't be funded in a similar manner. But the urgency of getting somebody in that position kind of makes this why this is going forward the way it is.
That is the intention, but I wouldn't want to mislead council. There's no guarantee that the TAPMO executive or the members will agree to an increased TAPMO membership fee that would cover this. There's no guarantee of that at all. I would certainly be making that case, and I know that Mayor Seeley, as the chair of TAPMO, is going to make that case strongly to all the TAPMO members that there is value in this and that they absolutely should be doing it. I think that, frankly, part of that argument, he's hoping, frankly, part of that argument would be that some municipalities have already voted with their checkbooks and said, we will fund this, there is value in this, and that would be part of the persuasive argument to the other municipalities to say, if they're willing to fund it to the tune of 25, then, if you fund it to the tune of, whatever your municipality would fund it at, you're getting a steal out of this. Look at the assessment that we all just got as a result of the one ruling. Deputy Mayor Grigg.
Do you know how many municipalities are members of TAPMO right now?
I don't off the top of my head, no. You know, when it was first started, it was, I think it was at first the top 10, but it's certainly more than 10 now. But off the top of my head, I do not know how many are actually like members paying their fees to be a member right now.
And then as a follow-up, in the discussion leading to this correspondence, there must be, I mean, if only 2 municipalities are willing to do this, then that's not enough funds to move forward. If all, say, 10 municipalities are interested in it, then that's a surplus of funds that would not be warranted. So is this currently just to gauge enough of an interest up to an investment of $25,000, but in theory, if there's enough buy-in, it could be less than $25,000?
100%. Executive had that discussion about that we would have to, based on what resolutions we got back from member municipalities, we would have to revisit it and say, so where are we at now? Because if it's 1, then it's not, obviously not going ahead. We wouldn't be able to. But yeah, if it was 7, then okay, that's more money than what we needed, and so we wouldn't be collecting then $25,000 from each kind of thing. So I think I answered your question. I'm not sure.
And then one follow-up, does TAPMO have an intended timeline? Because, so, have you read the motion yet? No, okay. Sure.
Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that council receive the correspondence from TAPMO dated January 2024, and that council direct the Director of Finance to prepare a report for council outlining the increased taxes that Zorra received due to the Assessment Review Board ruling and the feasibility of dedicating a portion of that new assessment to the proposed TAPMO Executive Director position. Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
So I'll put a pin in, I was asking you a question, because I'm going to hop over to, a few years ago, we were asked to provide some financial support through TAPMO to hire a consultant or to contract out some advocacy services specific to dealing with this tax class work that has resulted in us seeing a significant portion of added revenue that we are now going to get moving forwards. Some of what is being asked for in this motion, Director of Finance has actually already provided to us, so the report should be fairly straightforward to provide us, but it'll be taking that information and looking at it in a different context than how it was considered when we were doing budget. So I think, you know, in terms of identifying a specific advocacy role and then contracting out services for it, I view this as, you know, hiring internal and having better continuity to achieve the same thing, but through an ongoing singular individual as opposed to hiring out for contracted services. Also, if this becomes sort of the structure for TAPMO, then it also doesn't become a thing ongoing where we're going out to membership municipalities and sort of looking for money. I would be most interested in this if there's a method, a structure set up by TAPMO to make it equitable. I absolutely do not like the idea of us investing in something that we'll all benefit from where some are not investing in it. So I'm in support of writing the motion that was recommended in the correspondence to get that report back and have further conversations. But the question I was going to ask was the timeline TAPMO is anticipating, because so the recommendation is that we ask for reports that are really going to structure these good conversations in our area municipalities about the value of advocacy in relation to our aggregate pits. But in terms of being able to then as a municipality gauge our willingness to be interested, I would want to have a better sense of what TAPMO is receiving and when before we would commit to some sort of specific financial contribution. And the last comment I want to make around this is that, you know, I think here at least, I don't know about the other municipality, it's incredibly clear to us the impact of our gravel pits. The conversations around tax class were incredibly clear to us why that advocacy work was important, and the payoff is incredible. Right, and we had great conversations around being able to better invest into our roads network because of these added revenues. The thing that I want to highlight is that makes this type of investment very appealing right now. So this is a very strategic, smart time for TAPMO to be having this conversation. but the payouts that may be realized through this rule may not all have a financial component, and I am very interested in continuing to support it. If there's financial payout, if there's environmental payout, if there is a reduction in negative impact for residents payout, and all of those things, as an individual member of Zorra Council, are valuable to me. So as we come back with further information from TAPMO, based on the municipalities that are members' interest in it, I would like to make sure that we have the discussions of what we're going to get for this, and make sure that we're at least considering whether or not we value things outside of just the significant payout that we just witnessed, because we may not see that again. I don't anticipate we're ever going to have that type of outcome. But if we're able to, for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, pay into something where we're having other positive outcomes, I get lots of phone calls about chips and windshields from stones kicked up off the roads. We are surrounded by gravel pits. We always will be. And so this type of advocacy work is not something that we're able to achieve as an area municipality, which is why TAPMO exists. So I will be in support of the motion as recommended by TAPMO.
And I think there was a question in there around timing, right? It's okay, that's all good. So I would just say that Mayor Seeley, as the chair of TAPMO, is much like myself, like very impatient for action, like in general, but on TAPMO stuff in particular. He wants to move ahead with this as quickly as possible. That being said, there is no specific time sensitivity to it. There's no sort of looming date that we need to have a person in place by in order to do a thing that's not there. I know he's already put out feelers for some people that he's having sort of informal conversations with to find out, you know, who might be interested in this kind of role. But there's no ticking clock. There's no reason, in my opinion, that council couldn't get this report, consider the report, and decide what to do. It's not going to upset the apple cart of TAPMO, in my opinion. Councillor Stewart, as the seconder, do you wish to speak to it? Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, the reality is that if you want change at the federal or provincial level, you have to lobby for it. And that means in this case, we need an ongoing presence at Queen's Park. Someone that has a relationship with ministers, MPPs, and bureaucrats. And it's maybe a sad comment on democracy, but a strong lobby has more impact on policy than a backbencher does. And I don't think it's fair that TAPMO membership continues to rely on one or two municipalities to lead the charge on this, and that we move to the next step of having a TAPMO lobbyist at Queen's Park on our behalf. I share the concerns that it's possible that some members of municipalities at TAPMO will be paying more than their share, but that's not that unusual, that when you move into something new, the ones who are the leaders on the issues step up and contribute in many ways, and in this way financially. So I'm confident that if this goes forward, that TAPMO will come up with a equitable financing system for it. But I think it's the next step that towards representing the municipalities, because I'm very confident that the aggregate pit owners and on the other side have their lobbyists, and if we don't, then we're fighting battles with one arm tied behind our back.
Anyone else? I will read the motion again and call the question. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that council receive the correspondence from TAPMO dated January 2024, and that council direct the Director of Finance to prepare a report for council outlining the increased taxes that Zorra received due to the Assessment Review Board ruling and the feasibility of dedicating a portion of that new assessment to the proposed TAPMO Executive Director position. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9B, I have moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that correspondence item 9B be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. No boards and committees. Information items, I do have a motion here to receive and file 11A through C. Does anybody want to do anything different than that? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Finch, that items 11A through C be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And no unfinished business, no notices of motion. Bylaws. Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that bylaws 0624, 0724, and 0824 be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. And further, that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And items of community interest and the calendar, Councillor Finch. You want to lead us through that as usual?
February 13th, there's a pancake dinner at Knox in Embro from 5 to 7. February 17th is at the Legion in Embro is Wing Night from 5 to 9. March 1st, 7 p.m., the Egg Society is doing a winter social comedy show and concert at the Embro Community Center. Embro Minor Ball and Embro Minor Soccer registrations are open. And March 3rd is the Legion Breakfast, 9 to 12:30.
Monday, February the 12th, 7 p.m. HACA meeting. And Wednesday, 14th, 7:30 p.m. at Brown's Women's Institute is Wisdom Wednesday. And there's something different. They've got 5 local men who are going to give local tales and local history. I know 4 of these 5 gentlemen quite well, and some of the tales may even be true.
Anybody else with anything? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
Kevin and I have a Beachville District Museum meeting tonight, moved up so that those who observe the Valentine's Day holiday are able to partake. And on the 19th of February is Family Day, and the Thamesford Lions will be hosting a day of festivities that includes some events in the hall as well as some public skating, and they will have further details on Facebook. We also, the Multi-Use Courts Committee will be meeting next Tuesday in the Beatty Room, 7 p.m.
Anything else for the calendar? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that bylaw 09-24, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held February 7th, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time this February 7th, 2024, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And finally, moved by Finch, seconded by Stewart, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 11:42 a.m. And the next meeting of council be called for February 21st, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers of the Township Municipal Office. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried, and we are